We're live, sir.
Yes, sir, we are. Good to be back. Good to see you. How you been?
I've been living the dream. How about you?
Awesome. Same. Just working on my cars and trying to get through the last bit of winter. It's supposed to be 60 degrees here next week. So, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've been doing my part. I've just been leaving my truck run all the time to kind of help out with global warming a little bit. I'm a giver like that.
I
You're
never
welcome.
considered that. What a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Same way if I ever have another business, I'm going to employ nothing but women because I'll save a lot on payroll, right?
Not touching that one, sir.
No, that's the one that drives me nuts because there's more factors to it than that. After 23 years of owning a business, that one drives me nuts.
Yeah, no. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, exactly. So who we got jumping on this morning already?
Let's see who we got there. Mr. Alan Kelly, Will Rhodes. Let's see. Good morning, gentlemen. They're giving me some numbers. What does that mean?
Oh, that would be the American Warrior Society coin number. And honestly, my desk is a disaster area right now, so I don't have mine handy. But that gets you access to the training vault, and you get access to everything from BJJ, white belt to blue belt, combatives, vehicle defense, home defense, pistol shooting. The basics is where it's all at, right? You got your rifle, carbine, shotgun. It's all in there. You got go bags. Most importantly, start with the assessment. Find out where you're at. Find out what you got to work on. And then go to that part of the training vault and work on those things. There's some great articles in there. Dr. Fuller's got some in there. You have a number in there, of course. Yeah,
You've got one. You've got one or two in there.
I do have one in there. A little experience I had, and that was the day. Actually, I was always I listened to you and Mike back when you guys were still doing the podcast. What, twice a week back then? Mm-hmm. And I was still of the mindset of competition shooting, yeah. And then I had an encounter with a poacher on a little piece of land I have, and as he and I are talking, I realized I planned out exactly where I was going to start moving to if something popped off there, and realized I had basically just planned a stage.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was afterwards. Everything got settled down. I went, okay, I think I need to change my mind about this, and then got into shooting USPSA and got hooked up with you guys, and that set me down that road.
And here we are this morning.
Yes, here we are. So, yep, good stuff.
Yeah, it's all theoretical until it happens, and then it definitely will cause a mindset shift. If you're, next time, I'm going to be doubly ready.
Yep, and I'll tell you what. As I was sitting there talking with a guy, with my wife behind me, which added another factor to that, like a lot of self-defense situations. As I developed the plan, I don't think he ever had any intention of things becoming violent, but I could see in his eyes it went from maybe to no. I just want to get out of here.
Yeah.
So
now, did he have a firearm on him?
He did. Yep, had a rifle on him.
Well, that definitely takes it to a whole nother level.
Yep.
Another grown man on your property who's armed, and you're trying to get him off, and he may or may not want to leave.
Yep, and he's poaching turkeys out of season. So and trespassing at the same time. Yeah,
it's all bad.
Yep.
Let's see. We got Scott is on. Says, good morning, gentlemen. Guy, our good friend out there in the Philippines. Jerry is on. Says, long time no see. So glad you're on today. AWS 197. He's an OG. Please like, share, and comment. Troy is on. Says, good morning, fellows, up there in Indiana. If you want to find out if all this coined number stuff is the right decision for you and your family, you want to take your safety and security to the next level, you want to protect those you love from imminent harm, then I highly encourage you to take a free 14-day test drive. And that's about all the salesy crap we're going to do today. Right, brother?
All right. Well, yep. Sounds good to me, man. Let's dig in. We got a lot of slides here because, there's been a few things going on in the world since we talked last.
Say.
A couple things. I mean, I'm thinking maybe we can wrap it up in about 11 minutes.
Yeah.
So CNN's Fear Greed Index, surprisingly good indicator, in my opinion. We are at extreme fear at the moment, and you can see it's really been going down since about October. Um, a lot of this is Trump induced. Love him or hate him, the tariffs, the talk of the tariffs, the media hyping, the doom of everything. This all plays into it, and this is also a natural reaction to the run up after the election. Things ran up through basically the end of the year, so there's going to be a pullback, and people are kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. We've been talking recession, you and I have, for a couple years. It's basically been propped up by government spending in the meantime, and that government spending is stopping, right?
Yep.
And the market's trying to figure out what all this is going to do, whether it be Doge, whether it just be changes in policy, energy policy. A lot of changes happening. Market doesn't like unpredictability, so that's what's driving most of this, in my opinion.
Can we talk about that? Because there seems to be two competing, the market doesn't like unpredictability, one, and the money always seeks a return. And it seems like those two things are always at play.
Yes, absolutely. Agree. Fear and greed, two human emotions that run every market in the world, right? And this uncertainty causes fear. Well, is it going to be this, or is it going to be that, or could it be something else, or what's going to happen here and there? And the media plays up the geopolitical side. For the most part, in my experience, especially if you're looking at oil prices in particular, but markets in general, I tend to fade geopolitics when it comes to the markets. For the most part, the markets don't care. Yeah. NVIDIA is not going to change what they're doing because Russia, Ukraine, right? Microsoft, Google, your local utility company, they're not going to change because of what's going on. Zelensky got thrown out of a meeting. They don't care.
Well, how did the markets respond to that?
Honestly, I'm
saw
not sure.
surge on Friday, right?
Yeah, I think I really don't know. I wasn't watching that closely. That particular day.
But the question I guess I'm getting to is because some of my friends like, hey, did you see what the market did today? And I didn't, like you said, I wasn't watching that closely. And their position was it did it in spite of what happened between Trump and Zelensky. But my position might be maybe it was because of instead of in spite of.
Yeah, and it can be either, both. And the other thing too is, so here's one thing that I was made aware of through an article. I didn't come up with this. Was if you get your Yahoo Finance end of the day email, or you get it from whoever, it'll say the Dow went up 4% today because, and they'll fill in the blank with a couple items, right?
Right.
Well, how do you know it was that? How did they know it was that?
They don't.
Exactly. But what we do is day after day of seeing those news articles, the market did this because of this, did this because of this. After a while, we start to become conditioned that these are the things that drive the market. That's not the case.
Right.
And the day, whichever way the market went after Zelensky got thrown out of the White House, there could have been something completely different that happened that actually drove the markets. Right. So, correlation is not causation, right? So
that's right.
It gets really tough to sit there and say, oh, it was because of this. Now, sometimes you can do that. Jerome Powell comes out and speaks whenever it is this month and says, we're going to lower interest rates by 3%. That's not going to happen. But let's say he did that. Do you think the markets are going to take off? Oh, yeah. I would say there's some causation there, right? But for the most part, it's really hard to say this, that, or the other thing.
True.
So, yeah. All that in like $4 to buy a cup of Starbucks. So,
moving on.
All right, moving on here. This is one area where we need to keep an eye on, both as citizens, preparedness guys, right? And just also being ready for things. Tariffs could shock America's power system. We've talked about transformers from a number of angles in the past. They're quite the supply chain. May need to most come out of China. So if we get into a trade war with China, it's going to affect transformers, and that's going to affect you. It's going to affect me. Okay.
Mhm.
And here's the change in price of transformers since January of 2020. So more than doubled
Can we talk
for
about
power
that for a quick
transformers.
second?
Please. Yes.
I read somewhere recently where a large power transformer, which is our critical vulnerability in our grid, because they come from China and they take a year to 2 years to make, and et cetera, et cetera. We've been down this road multiple times. For those of you that are avid watchers of the show, you know what we're talking about. No, so they brought one in and took it to Sandia National Lab and gave it to the scientists to tear apart. And the amount of malware and ransomware and other spying apparatus that were on this thing was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
So again, maybe that could be something with regard to tariffs. Like, we'll lift the tariff if you start putting crap on our large power transformers.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do that. We know they do that with the equipment, the cranes that go into the ports.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's a U.S. operated port, they're using Chinese cranes, and we know those things are loaded up with malware and back doors to control those cranes. They can shut them down.
Shut them down.
So, the other thing I learned in reading this particular article from the Wall Street Journal is that even when the utility company gets these transformers, they run them, depending on how critical they are to the grid, they run them through a test period. They can off the grid, operating, but off the grid for up to a year.
Mm-hmm.
So just because a transformer gets delivered doesn't mean it's going to hit your neighborhood 3 days later.
Right.
It could be quite a period of time. So, it doesn't have to be some big, CME, EMP, whatever a fictional book is going to be written about. It can just be, I don't know, big hurricane, some storms, some wildfires, take out a bunch of transformers can trigger this. Okay. The other thing I want everybody to think about, just from a family budget standpoint, is let's keep in mind how utility rates are set.
Yeah,
they're a regulated industry. They go to the state utility board and say, here are our costs per our charter with the state government. We're guaranteed a X. Usually it's like a 4 or 5% net profit margin. Well, here's what happened to the price of our transformers. So now you're going to pay a percentage on top of that doubling. And of course, that will compound over time. Mm-hmm. So utility bills are only going one direction here, guys.
Well, you're just a ray of sunshine.
I am, aren't I, though? Just sunshine and lollipops here in Wisconsin this morning.
Wisconsin.
I see Resmick is on. Gold member. Hope your arm's doing better there, buddy. Hope you finally got to the doctor.
Kidding. Shoulder surgery. I saw that.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah. Guile is on. And he says, what's going on? The Trump and Vance trumping Zelensky. We'll get to that in due course.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
John Shriver is on Yukon, Oklahoma. Joseph is joining us on the YouTubes. Gold member. I'm sure he's very happy that he made those gold purchases 5 years ago. It's damn near double in that time. Donald Green is on from Occupied Virginia. Dr. Corden Botson. Good morning, sir. Derek says, let's see. Sorry, Derek. Good morning from North Carolina. Alan Kelly says, don't need transformers to make power utilities up prices. My utility has increased prices almost 100%.
Yep. Yeah. So, and I'll throw a plug in there. I've got a solar system on the house, guys. It's an upfront cost. Mine is about before prices started going up, it was about an 8.5 year payback. I think I'm probably down. I haven't mathed it out lately. I do have an Illinois public school education, so it takes me a while to math things. But I'd be willing to bet now I'm down total probably 7 years. It's, I'm not a believer in solar for big macro generation, but for micro generation on a house, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to get the utility bill and see a negative number on there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Please like, share. Thank you to the 16 folks watching us on 2 different platforms right now. Please share this content with someone who needs it. All right, what's this thing right here? China Mole's $6.8 billion funding to help.
It seems like 2 lifetimes ago, we were talking about Evergrande, right? Yeah. Well, Evergrande's been liquidated. That was about a year ago. They were ordered to liquidate. Now you got Vanke. Vanke is another Evergrande. Not hearing much about this in the news. I just tripped across this on Bloomberg. They're issuing special bonds to buy unsold homes. So they got homes sitting vacant. They're getting ready to go bankrupt, and the government and the company are both selling bonds to pay for these homes. So now they're going to pay interest to pay for homes that they couldn't sell. That doesn't seem like a good business plan to me. But, and what do I know? So this is also one of those situations where the Chinese have backed themselves into a corner with real estate. This is one of the major ways that they build wealth in China is real estate. And so now you've got another developer that is vastly overdeveloped, and they're running a problem. So one of these is going to actually cause a problem for them that they are going to suffer from. Looks like Evergrande, they were able to paper over that, much like we papered over a lot of our problems back in 2008. They were able to paper over, and by paper over, I mean print a whole bunch of money and kick the can down the road. As we learned in 2008, you can only kick that can so far.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and that'll play into everything else, right? If things start falling apart in China, then Taiwan becomes more of a player. Their activities in Africa become more of a player. So just something to keep an eye on.
All right. Powell predicts a time when mortgages will be impossible to get in parts of the United States. What is this?
Yes. So what he's referring to is insurance. So you got a mortgage, that mortgage company requires you have insurance on your home, right? They want to be made whole if that home is damaged or destroyed. But as I can tell you what home insurance prices are doing, because I just got my bill, it was almost a 50% increase with no claims. Because those of us in Wisconsin have to pay off for everybody in California and Florida. Same as the folks in Tennessee and Ohio and Oklahoma. And not Guile, you're off the hook on that one in the Philippines. So this is pricing people out. And in some cases, as we see here at the bottom, some insurance companies are just flat pulling out of markets. They're refusing to write policies there or refusing to renew policies that are coming up. We've talked about that in the past. In California, State Farm, about a year ago, just said we're not writing new policies. And if your policy comes up, we're not going to write you a new one. Flat out refused to. And they, in the case of California, they came out and said it's poorly managed forest. So there's going to be a huge forest fire. Turns out they were right.
Shocker.
And and insurance companies have been doing much the same in Florida. We will see this ball come around. We're seeing it in Florida. Insurance companies are going in there. A bunch left. There's always it takes time, right? A whole bunch of insurance companies left. Insurance rates skyrocketed. And then other insurance companies who weren't ever on the hook for the hurricane damage there, when it said we can charge how much and we don't have to pay off those old claims. So they moved in and they started driving prices down. So we're seeing it start to turn in Florida in relationship to the insurance prices. Still very high. I still see listings down there. People are up against it on homeowners policies. And I've been looking down there for a few years. And I have run across listings where, you talk to the realtor, it's motivated seller. Homeowners policy is due on April 1st, need to be out by March 31st because I can't pay it. Seeing the same thing down there with HOAs. I ran across a smaller place, 1 bedroom, 1 bath in Orlando, $90,000 condo. Good area, so on and so forth. So $90,000 purchase price, back of the envelope math, probably costs you about $800 a month, mortgage, interest, everything. $2,000 a month HOA.
$2,000.
$2,000 because they'd fallen behind on maintenance, and under the new Florida law, they have to catch that up.
Oh my God!
So So there'll be a special assessment. Here's your special assessment for $125,000 for your condo. But you got 90 days to pay it, by the way.
Oh no!
And those cannot be passed on to a buyer. They have to be paid by the owner when that special assessment is put out. So even if they try to sell the place, they have to bring enough money to closing to pay the special assessment.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yep. So Yeah. So it's so this is what's going on in residential properties. If this starts to happen, I think this could cascade. Um, how do I put this? If it becomes a real issue to get homeowners insurance, or it's really prohibitively expensive, there's going to be a shift in who can afford a home, right?
Yeah.
Do you have the contacts to get a homeowner's insurance policy? Can you afford it? Will that drive more people to rent? Because yes, they still pay the insurance. However, it's broken down into, monthly payments without the big upfront, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to see that.
Yeah, I think Michael Gentili certainly speaks for me in this. I'd never be in an HOA again.
Yep.
Yeah. One and only experience, one and done. Learn my lesson.
Yep. I don't want nothing to do with them. It's my property. I'll do what I want with it.
Yeah, have a nice day.
Yep. So along these lines, we've been talking about real estate. I mean, going back quite a ways. But if you go back to the pandemic, we all remember the pandemic boom towns, right? Where the home prices skyrocketed. Boise, Austin, the entire state of Florida, take your pick, right? It exploded because there was a lack of supply. And so developers started building out multifamily, right? Well, that takes a long time. It takes a long time to get the permitting, the financing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Well, now that's come full circle. So now we've got a glut of multifamily coming on in these places, and it's driving rents down a lot. Austin rents go down 22%. So there's another thing in here that honestly I never really thought about until I saw this, and this is the part here. New policies encouraging housing density. So that's a nice way of saying apartment buildings versus single family homes. So then you get, unless they condo those out where you get individual ownership, this is developing renters for life. You'll own nothing and like it.
That's right.
That sound familiar, or did I just make that up?
And then we got to eat bugs. I think there's somewhere in there too.
Yeah. That's two things that ain't happening. Okay.
I think this is really going to bother this right here. The fact that rent is coming down, the rent is too damn high. Party is really going to take a hit on this.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, because people won't be so upset anymore. Yeah. Right. Here's the other part of it too. This affects the homeowners in Austin or Florida or Wisconsin or Tennessee or fill in the blank. Yep. You get rent starts dropping by 22%, and you're trying to sell your home or rent out a rental property you have as an investment. What's happening to your property value? It's getting driven down because it's cheaper to go rent. Why should I go buy that place for $150,000 and have a basically $1,400 a month payment for a 3-bed, 2-bath, and I could go spend $900 a month and have a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment, or $1,100, something cheaper, whatever the numbers are. Make up whatever makes you happy there for exact numbers. So this will drive single family stuff, right?
Yep.
So then we have to get into, like we opened up with this, and he brought up that markets are an emotional thing, right? Fear and greed. So those are feelings. Okay. Well, how suddenly you see your property value dropping because of this? How does that make you feel?
Right.
Well, it make you feel the opposite of how you felt when it was going up by 10% a year. So this is going back to Greenspan, the wealth effect, or in this case, the unwealth effect. You start watching your property value go down.
You spend less.
Exactly. You don't feel as wealthy. You don't feel like you can go out. Maybe we'll save a little less for retirement and spend that and have fun because the house is going up 10% a year. Right. Well, next thing you know, that starts becoming the self-licking ice cream cone, right? So, and at the bottom here, you can see, Donna brings up a good point. We need to talk about that. You go back to 2018, look at the hockey stick that started happening here. But one thing I want you guys to pick up on here is from 2019 to 2022, it was flat. Because the reason it was flat is that's how long it takes to permit and get things going. Because you'll notice the chart here, new apartments opened. So that 2019 to 2022, that was permitting, construction, getting occupancy permits, fill in all those blanks, right? And now here comes the glut. And I'd be willing to bet there's still more coming on the market in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is a move, especially I see in Florida, condoing out a lot of these apartment buildings. But then you start talking HOAs, and then you get how you, me, Michael, and probably just about everybody else watching feels about HOAs. But I will say, in talking with people I know who live in big cities, a lot of them they don't know any different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it matters for a lot of us, including me. I'm not sure how much it really matters in a lot of these areas. It's just a way of life. Right. So, all right. Let's
go to Don's question.
What's Donald say there?
Housing density by policy goes back to Agenda 21. Live, work, and play in the same multi-use walkable region. Get rid of suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Doug says in the Columbus, Ohio area, young adults, especially couples, do not want homes or property. They would rather rent apartments or purchase condos so they can move every 2 to 3 years and have limited maintenance repair responsibilities. I've spoken to many in this demographic, and I've been told many times that travel and free time is more important than home repair and mowing lawns.
Yes.
Yeah.
Generational differences, right?
Absolutely.
I remember, I think it was a show you, I, and Dr. Fuller did together, or perhaps it was just you and him, and you were talking about it. But he's spoken to younger family members and been like, nope, you buy a house, you build equity, the whole Gen X thing, right? Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, what are you talking about? Why would I want to do that?
Right.
And there is something. I remember when my bride and I bought our first home. Yeah, it's a little scary. Something could break and I could be on the hook for $600, $700, $800, hot water heater, washer, dryer, fill in the blanks, right?
Yep.
And it's a completely different mentality now. And it took a while to get used to that, right? That uncertainty. But there's also a generational change here in the younger generations. They don't like that uncertainty. They're very risk adverse.
No.
And this is of course a stereotypical statement, so we're going to see, I think, more of this moving toward a safer alternative that Doug described. And again, I don't think that's a good thing overall. Now, maybe that's my Gen X-ness coming out. But that's good. And the reason I think that's a bad thing is this is going to create more of a haves and have-nots.
Oh yeah. And the wealth divide is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, it's overall, it's not going to be a good thing, but it's going to take years and years and years to play out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we'll have the political ramifications of that.
Oh yeah, and that'd be fun.
Yep. So
having some technical difficulties, guys. Sorry about that. Unbeknownst to you guys on the side, I'm having some problems on the back end, but hopefully we can power through this.
Okay, sounds good. We have full faith and confidence in your abilities there, sir.
Please don't.
I was just trying to make you feel better.
Thank you.
I'm going to be honest about it. U.S. retail spending plunged last month, talking about January here, falling for first time since August. So this is, to some extent, going to happen with the tariffs, with the news media's coverage of the tariffs and the drama and blah, 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 right? Some of this, at some point, this is going to be real. Okay. And by real, I mean, people just really can't spend anymore. So the other thing when they talk about this plunge is, what is it compared to, right? So they're comparing it to the month before. So we've got underlined here, December's upwardly revised 0.7% gain. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then so it went down 0.9%. So from plus 0.7% month over month to down 0.9%, when they've been expecting a 0.4% decline. You'll notice that the figures are adjusted for seasonal swings, meaning that compares January to January. We can't compare retail spending in January compared to June. It's apples and oranges, right? But it's not adjusted for inflation. Inflation is still running about 0.3% per month. So if you really want to get into the brass tacks of it, this would be about a 1.2% decline in real spending. Now, the where I see this playing out over time is, fear begets fear, right? So if someone's working and they're seeing business slow down and they're looking at layoffs, which we're going to get into some here in a bit, the this can start spiraling down the same way it spiraled up, right? So we'll see this played up. The other part of this too is, actually, I'm going to say we're going to do a little GDP talk here as well, but it's going to dovetail into this with fear and the tariff policies. Okay, so we'll save that for that slide. Did I see a couple of comments come in there?
Muted. Okay, yeah. Dr. Gordon Butson says they will figure that out if and when they have kids. Steve Mark says they may not understand the opportunity cost of not getting any appreciation. Boy, that is a fact.
Yep, for sure. So
let's see. We also have Anthony's point. I want to come back to that one. Everyone ready for a huge recession?
Mm-hmm.
And then Alan says, in reference to Gordon's comments, fewer couples are straying away from having children, or they're staying single. Yeah, I think we're seeing that. Other industrialized countries have seen that. Western Europe has seen this. Japan, lots of places in Asia.
Yep. Korea's doing baby payments.
Yeah.
I forget the exact dollar amounts now. It's been a while, but something like if you have a baby, they'll send you, gosh, I want to say it was equivalent like $2,000 a month until that child turns 18.
Wow. And, I think Trump is floating the idea of free IVF. So,
I mean, the bottom line is you got to have the humans to run stuff. AI is great. Robotics is great. I think all those machines are cool. But at some point, you got to have humans.
That's right.
So, matter of fact, along those same lines, I'm going to goof up the details on this. But when Canada was being developed, settled by the French, they had a population problem. So France set 800 women over, and they called them something like the daughters of the king or something like that. And something crazy, like 40% of the population of that area of Canada can trace their heritage back to those 800 women.
I'd heard that. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So this is nothing new, right?
Nope.
It's just, we get caught up with so much other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's some stuff I just want to kind of throw out there. Want to hear your comments, everybody else's comments on this stuff. So this goes into retail spending and the GDP talk I was referring to, where business purchases pulled forward into the fourth quarter of 24 and early in the first quarter of 25 because of tariff fears. I can tell you as a former business owner who still knows a lot of business owners, on the business side, that's an absolute yes. They even went so far as to take on debt in some cases to purchase inventory ahead. So that pulled all that forward. Because if you're looking at a promised 25% increase through tariffs, well, if I buy it now and say it's retails for $1,000, right, and I buy it for whatever, but after the tariff, people are expecting that price to be $1,250. But I still bought it at the old price, the pre-tariff price. Now I can make more money, and it lets me cash flow into the new tariff and not have to take that hit later. I know a number of business owners that did precisely that. So is that going to artificially increase the GDP numbers for fourth quarter of 24 and then have a big pullback after that? Because suddenly now, those businesses aren't making those purchases because they purchased ahead. Have some retail customers done that here and there? I did. Right. So, of course, the Trump administration will get all the blame if the GDP drops, right? To that extent, you may have run across some news articles, or you'll hear about it here pretty soon if this trend continues. The Atlanta Fed does a GDP nowcast. So every week they update what their prediction is for the current quarter's GDP. So right now, I think it's Tuesday, sticks in my head, they do their GDP nowcast for where they think the first quarter of 2025 GDP is going to come in at. Okay. If we go to the next slide, we'll take a look at that real quick, and then we'll come back to this one.
Okay.
So this is their nowcast. This is off their website. And so you got the blue chip consensus. That's Wall Street, where they think it's going to come in at. So you got the blue shaded area, range of top 10 and bottom 10 forecasts with a line through the middle for the average. Pretty straightforward, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you look at the green line, that's the Atlanta Fed GDP nowcast. And you'll see as of 25th of February, they're now casting a negative 1.5% GDP report for the first quarter of 2025 on an annualized basis. And a lot of people in the financial world are, oh my God, Trump's awful, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's dig into the weeds on this a little bit, how this is done. Okay. So we've talked about annualizing before, and that's where you take a number and turn it through the magic of multiplication, turn it into an annual number. So if you have 1% inflation in a month, annualized, that's 12%. Mm-hmm. Well, this is a quarterized number. So they take and multiply it by 3 to get a quarter of the year. So and they're doing this as numbers are coming in. Okay. So if you get one number that skews high or skews low, you're going to multiply that by 3 and then multiply that by 4 in this case to get your annualized number. So in other words, when there's very few numbers there being reported yet, those few numbers can have a very outsized impact on this GDP nowcast. Mm-hmm. Did that make as much sense out loud as it did in my head?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So you're going to hear about this in the news, especially if it starts dropping even more. I've seen this nowcast. There were times, well, heck, you can look back on the 4th of February. It was showing almost a positive 4%. And look how it just plummeted because a few numbers came in and then they quarterized it and then annualized it. Hmm. Okay. So when you start hearing about this in the news, I just kind of go, whatever. It's a little bit like lottery numbers until you get right towards the end of the quarter. And by then we all pretty much know where it's going to come in at anyway.
All right. All right. So, I'm going to bounce back here.
All right. Sounds good. So let's have a little discussion of the short-term effect of Doge firings on unemployment numbers. Mm-hmm. Unemployment is going to go up. And of course, that will be seen as the end of the world because government bureaucrats have lost their job versus Keystone XL pipeline workers at the beginning of the Biden administration, right? That was learn to code, tough crap, deal with it, right?
Yep.
But we're going to hear about it over and over and over again ad nauseum, right? The interviews that we've all seen the snippets of on YouTube or Instagram or wherever you saw them at, right? And so this is going to have a larger impact and feeling. Okay. How many people who got fired when Biden shut down the Keystone XL pipeline? I didn't know a single person, either directly or indirectly, who was affected by that. Mm-hmm. But I know people who are being affected by Doge.
Oh, I do too.
Right. So then there's more of a feeling, right? It's still a recession because it's your neighbor, right? Versus the depression when it happens to you. Mm-hmm. However, when it's somebody, that was Jim. Yeah, Jim got doged, and I totally made that term up, I think. Then there's more of a feeling to it versus, say, the Keystone pipeline, right? So there's a big difference there in the feelings of that, and feelings, as we've talked about, drive behavior. Oh, yeah. Behavior drives markets, fill in the blank, whatever market that is.
So, and as painful as Doge is on the micro and macro level, and they're going to get things wrong, and they're going to pull a plug out of a socket that they probably shouldn't have. And I get it, but at the same time, it has to be done this way. It has to be done.
I'm in agreement with you. It hurts. I know people who are being hurt by it, and it sucks.
It's awful.
It sucks for them. I feel for them. I truly do. Here's the thing. So here's one for you. Do you know the last president who did something like Doge?
Was it Clinton?
It was Clinton. Yeah. Do you happen to remember? And this is a stump the chump question, and I wouldn't know this if I hadn't read an article on it. It was 377,000 federal workers he fired. Did it over a course of years. Did it nice and slow. just the way the government likes, right? And there was a Republican Congress critter of one house or the other who said, I think Trump's moving too fast here. We need to slow this down and have a study. And his estimate for the study was 6 to 9 months, which means somewhere between 4.5 and 18 years, right? Which, in other words, means nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, of course. The study's going to say, and it shouldn't be done, can't be done, better not do it, whatever, fear and loathing kind of crap. I'm just not interested in it. Got to do it.
Yep, absolutely.
I want to get to a couple of comments here before we go much farther afield. Japan is giving incentives to women who get pregnant and benefits. And every time we talk about this, Will, I don't know about you, it always reminds me of Rat Utopia, that study that they did. And, every time the culture of rats gets decadent, they stop having little rat babies, they stop fighting over territory, and there's a collapse, and the population goes from 2,500 to 0 in a matter of no time flat. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. Let's get another comment here.
And to your point, and to our discussion about Canada way back in the day, this is nothing new. And this is, the people moving the chess pieces around the world see us in much the same way as those rats, right?
Oh yeah, that's exactly the way. I mean, ask old Klaus what he thinks.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael says we'll see tomorrow night. Will Parker says, "Yeah, I ripped my band-aids off."
Yes,
and it's painful. We all get it. I mean,
and it is, but the behemoth has grown too large, and the cuts will go too far, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's call it what Hobbes called it, the Leviathan.
Yeah, well, and the cuts will go too far. And then you either call back or replace. And to be completely cold and purely numbers about it, if someone gets doged and they're at second year pay because they've got a 2-year probationary period, when you rehire, when you hire someone to replace them, you're going to bring them back in at first year pay. And the other thing too is I bet you it's going to change the mindset around the federal government too.
And this is I'm going to go back to this because you're right. And the pushback that I give to my friends, and some of us, we've had some heated conversations, and that's good. We love each other, but at the same time, we're looking through the world at two different lenses. And my position is having a federal job it's a privilege. It's not a right. And it's like, yeah, but these people have families. I'm like, so did everyone that got killed as a federal worker storming the beaches. And so if you have a minor inconvenience, then, don't work for the federal workforce. Maybe you get yourself a nice, safe job at Goldman. Oh, by the way, you probably get fired there too. Nothing is secure in life. And that's just the way it is. Nothing.
Well, and let's remember too, kind of even during our lifetimes, it was, you got a government job. I'm thinking more when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, you got a government job. You didn't make as much money as you did in the free market, but you had all these holidays off, very generous benefits, including a pension. And those pensions are still there, even though it's very rare in the private sector.
Yeah.
But then somewhere along the lines, it pays just as good, if not in some cases better than the private market.
That's right.
And you still had all those benefits.
That's right.
That's unsustainable.
It is absolutely unsustainable. Donald says, if you haven't seen the breaking news, vehicle attack in Mannheim, Germany this morning, 1 dead, multiple injuries. I had not seen that, Donald.
I had not seen that either. Thanks for the heads up.
What's Gerald say?
It cuts in the Forestry Department of firefighters in Oregon as an example of not looking at the positions versus who they work for. Yes. And this is going to be, there's going to be pain here. After many, many years in business, and other guys I see here have been in business as well, when you got to take an axe to it, you can measure the micrometer, but I'm going to swing an axe at it. And there's going to be mistakes made. It's the old 80-20 thing, right? If I sit around and wait for the 100% solution, nothing's ever going to happen. Let's get moving in the right direction and we can tweak it in.
That's right.
So number 3 here, and we touched on this before, but to dig into it a little bit further, decrease in multifamily rent is going to result in more people renting, less homes sold, both new and existing homes, fewer capital expenditures. People aren't going to be buying furniture. They aren't going to be buying refrigerators because I'm not buying a new refrigerator for my rental, right? Maybe some furniture, right? But not the other durable goods. And that's going to impact the job market.
Mm-hmm.
It will take time for all that to filter through, right? Staying on the housing market, if you guys see it, there's some bovine excrement going around about the DC market, DC home market, most listings ever and blah, blah, blah. They're not seasonally adjusting that in those YouTube videos you will run across out there. So I see this in Wisconsin. Every year, there's very few listings for homes in December, January, February. And then it starts coming in March because nobody wants to move in the winter. So I don't want to buy a place in the winter. I don't want to sell my place in the winter because either way, I got to move. And doing that on icy sidewalks and driveways, and not to mention sometimes the wind chills 30 below, is not a fun thing. So a lot of this in DC is seasonal. So they're looking at, to Gordon Bosden's comment, every time you multiply those out, you introduce more errors. He's speaking to economic numbers. Same thing here. So if you look at the number of homes coming on the market right now in DC where things are warming up, temperature wise, not politically necessarily. But if you look at that month over month and multiply that out by 12, it looks like it's absolutely exploding. Look back a year before and you're going to see much the same numbers. So be aware of that if you run across that. That's some fear mongering clickbait stuff on YouTube. Okay. What's Doug have to say?
There's an interesting comment here. Says the feds can issue block grants to the state and local governments to accomplish the same work as federal workers do, but will have more focus on the local issues instead of looking at every issue with the federal big government perspective, i.e. tax and spend.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when those get cut, now what's the state do? If they still want that happening, you raise state income tax?
I don't know. I think maybe it's one of those deals where I want the grant to come back. Oh, great. Then you need to get on the Trump's agenda and hand over your, illegals to Tom Homan and Kristi Noem.
Yeah. And the same way,
Trump's always seeking leverage, right?
Right. Absolutely. And I'll go a step further. Every president's always seeking leverage, right? Biden sought leverage. Biden sought leverage, with federal funds through COVID vaccines, through LGBTQ issues, right? Back in the day, they used federal highway funds to basically require every state or bend their arm to get them to require seatbelt laws.
That's right.
That's how it happens. So
and 21 drinking age, a whole host of things. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So this is also why I am, and I would bet you agree with me, I want more power back to the states.
Bingo.
Because local decisions will be better decisions for that area. So what's Will say there?
Regarding cuts, I know a United States Army Master Sergeant who was at 19 years, 9 months, who was medically separated at 100% disability, but wouldn't allow him to retire and draw that pay. Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the particulars on that one. That does not sound good.
Yep. And of course, we got to talk tariffs a little bit. We're seeing this happen. We're seeing this leverage play out. I read a stat that I wasn't aware that it was this much, but both Canada and Mexico, 70% of their economy is exports. And the vast majority of those come to the United States. So when Trump takes that tariff shot across the bow, it might hurt us. It would hurt us if suddenly we weren't getting things from Mexico or there's 25% tariff. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt when we go to the store. They will have an outright depression. Can you imagine your economy going down by 60%? Right? And Scheinbaum down in Mexico just came out last week and said, I guess we are open to Mexico putting a tariff on goods coming from China to make Trump happy. I guess we are okay with that.
Well, and I think we're seeing signs of that. Was it over the weekend? They extradited 29 heads of cartels here to do their prison.
Yeah.
And if we remember nothing from the Pablo Escobar situation, he wanted no part of coming to America. So he leveraged Colombia and did a terror campaign to get them to change the Constitution.
Yep.
So they would never allow him to be sent to the United States. So I love it. If that strikes fear in them, then more of that.
Yep, for sure. So
what was your point about J-Dog's comment there?
So a while back, Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, I call him J-Dog because that's what I have him in my phone as when he calls. The he was making a comment. This has been maybe 2 years ago. He's talking about inflation and high interest rates and how that will reset a system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about how the pain of the decade of the 70s set up the prosperity we've enjoyed for the last 40 years. That's paraphrasing, but pretty darn close. And I'm really starting to think we are going to go through the same thing over the next however long, whatever that period of time is. Personally, I think it'd be a little bit shorter this time around because things do happen a little faster now. I'm seeing predictions out there now from, I think, pretty credible sources that even within this calendar year, we're going to go into a little bit of stagflation here. And then this one forecast I saw, a short but possibly pretty bumpy recession. Now, who knows what'll actually play out? But I think in the longer term, this is going to look a lot like the 70s. And hopefully the music gets that good again. And hopefully the performance of the cars is better this time around because the cars in the 70s were not runners. But if we go through that pain, the pain that mainly our parents felt, it set us up for 40 years of a heck of a run.
Hell yeah.
And, you and I are both in our 50s and it'll hurt coming towards retirement. But that's going to set us up later in life and our kids up for a fantastic period to live through.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, and this is, I got to squint at it to say these words, but I'm seeing that pain as an investment for my children.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So I think overall it'll be a good thing. The system needs to be reset. These things are going to be painful. There's going to be a lot of hand wringing. But this is the cycle, and we have evaded the cycle through excessive money printing for decades.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I want to get to Anthony's comment. He says the recession will be worse than the 70s, at least for the middle and lower classes. I think he's probably right.
I think I think you're right. If I can dig into that a little bit, Anthony, I think you're right in the severity of it, but maybe not the duration.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because things are going to be, we're more globalized. Part of this is going to be unglobalizing, right? Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a very interesting time. We also know that the psyche of the American public is not to put up with pain because we've all been conditioned to print money, give me stimmy checks. I mean, let's face it, Trump's even fallen into it. Those stimmy checks. I'm like, no, don't. Put it against the debt. Put it against something useful. Don't send it out because, and this is where I don't care if it's Bush saying the most patriotic thing you can do post 9/11 is go to the mall, right? Well, you roll your eyes at it, and I get it, but let's face it: if the consumer shuts down, our economy implodes, and that's what he was getting at, right? That's why we had this. That's why we had helicopter money from Ben Bernanke after the housing crisis under Obama. Right. Because we went into deflation for 2 quarters. They had to put the money out there. You had to get the consumer spending money again. COVID, stimmy checks. You had to have people out there spending money, or we would have gone into a Great Depression over that. And the hardest part of the 2-week shutdown is the 4th year. We know this. Okay. So this is the same thing. This is my opinion. This is why he wants those Doge stimmy checks to go out there, because people are going to go out and spend it, especially with prices where they are. That keeps the GDP numbers up. That keeps the popularity up, all those things. So I agree with you. Put it towards the debt, right? I'll suck it up. I'll figure it out. But that's not the majority of the population. They've been conditioned to government checks, free money to make things go away. And I think Trump short term would be vilified, but long term would be canonized if he would just come out and say, listen, we're going to suck up some pain here. We got to reset the system. But it's not going to happen.
He can't do that. Jimmy Carter tried that. It didn't work out.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, he did. And it blew up on him. Doug says, how many of us remember the pain of the 70s? I do. I was young, but I remember how much my parents struggled. Also, the long gas lines. Yep, remember that. So many parents of my friends who were out of work, even McDonald's had commercials about getting food while waiting in the gas line.
Yep.
I have a problem with kick the can crap. I mean, one time I had a commander came in, I was his operations guy, and he's like, Rich, because as a staff officer, you always give your commander 3 COAs or 3 courses of action: COA A, COA B, COA C. Well, all of them were some version of fix the problem this year, right? It wasn't, we had the momentum, we had the money, we had the resources. Why push this damn thing any further? You've got the will of your command to go, go, go. And he's like, give me a COA A.1 and A.1 alpha and this and that. And so I finally started late because they were kick the can. I see what he was doing. So I'm like, sir, I'd like to brief you now on the kick the can COA. And he's like, Rich, I'm like, that's what we're doing, sir. I want to tell you, this is a kick the can. It pissed him off every time I did it. But I'm like, at some point, somebody's got to stop kicking the can. And that's us. And now I hope that we'll have the courage and the steadfastness to bear it out. Because if we do, man, the 2030s could be freaking awesome.
Yep. Well, and as you're saying that, all I can think was that's the difference between management and leadership. Yeah, we've been managing this country for a long time.
It's time to lead, boys.
So, yep.
Our good friend over there in the UK is on. Thank you to the 20 folks watching us live on 2 different platforms. Craig says, good afternoon, gentlemen. Sorry, I'm late. Congratulations on now becoming the world police. I think that's appropriate segue. I'd like to, let's go ahead and watch this thing and then we'll.
Okay.
Let me do this, do share screen.
Don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right. I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh?
I think we've seen enough. What do you think?
Yeah. You know, and this is what really struck me about that whole thing was what's come out afterwards. You know, when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, okay. Well, now we find out that Zelensky met with a coalition of Democrats just before that, who reports from in the room say they told him walk away from it. Don't sign the agreement.
Really?
Yes. Seen that from a number of sources yesterday and this morning. And with pictures.
I haven't seen that.
The congressman, I believe it was, who is claiming what I just described is shown in a picture in the room with Zelensky at the meeting prior to going to the White House.
Man, I don't know. Obviously, obviously it doesn't rise to the level of treason, but I don't know
Mhm.
what it is. It's
Well, anything to make
bad.
Trump look
Like,
bad, right? Pure
I
pure
know.
politics, right? So
Yeah, but that's one of the most disgusting political brews I think I've ever heard, because you're playing
yeah.
with a lot, we got 1 million people dead, Russians
Mhm.
and Ukrainians, and it's not good for anybody to
Yep.
do that.
Agreed. And it's just if we back off this, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, and these are the things that the sausage making of international politics, and this is one very, very singular instance that may be somewhat unprecedented in American politics, where we see it on display, and all of its ugliness. But at the same time, there's several other things at play. You have that meeting with the Democrats that happened beforehand. I did not know about that. That's very interesting. But you also have language barriers. I don't know that if he understood the metaphor of playing cards, I think that
Agreed.
went over his head. And it was one of the few times that he's operating in English without a translator. So there's miscommunication. There's cultural differences there. There's a guy who's probably war weary. And there's Trump, who really, he's a deal maker. He says it.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you told me to read that book, because it is the art of the deal. And he says in the very beginning of the book, I love making deals. Some people love this, this, and this. They have these hobbies. Mine is deal making. He loves it. So for him, this was, and not getting the thing he wanted. Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Everybody.
Yep. And there's Zelensky's been able to, since the whole Ukraine war started, he's been able to go everywhere and say, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And everybody said, yes, yes, yes. And so now he's getting somebody who's pushing back or wanting something in trade, the rare earth minerals, correct? So, so this is the first time he's run across that. Also, and I'm throwing this out there, I'm going to call this speculation because I don't speak Ukrainian, and I read 2 articles about this. When Vance was laying into Zelensky, he'd said something in Ukrainian, and there's pictures out there. What's that?
Sutka or something like that. Bitch.
Yeah. Called him a bitch in Ukrainian. Now, that's also where you see the picture of the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. She's sitting over there with the press like this. So, I'm sure that has been since translated for Vice President Vance and President Trump, and but you got a bunch of people, in this case all men. You got a bunch of men who are used to getting their way, and a bunch of there's only 2 types of personalities that go into those positions. The one that's type A and super type A, right? So you're going to clash of egos, power, perhaps some desperation thrown in there too on Zelensky's side. We don't know what happened all in that meeting that Alan Kelly referred to. Chris Murphy, senator, was one to Zelensky not to sign the deal. So
he's the only one that said he will not be at Trump's message to Congress tomorrow night.
Okay. So yeah, so this is gonna be interesting to see how this plays out. What else you got on this, brother?
Well, the final thing is, I think you're right. He's been a media darling since Russia invaded. Yep. And this is one of the first times that somebody's like, hey man, you need to be a little bit more contrite. Swagger in here and give me another blank check, daddy. Yeah. That ain't gonna work. You need to borrow the car again. No. Time for you to get a job, son.
Yeah. Well, and in fairness to Zelensky, if Trump would have treated me the way he did when Zelensky arrived at the White House, Zelensky was wearing his uniform, if you will, which I've never really understood, but whatever, it's his deal. And Trump's like, oh, look, he dressed up for this. Look how dressed up he is. I was kind of like, ooh, shot across the bow there. Okay, so we're setting the tone right away. So honestly, it probably didn't help. So I get it. If I'm going to the White House, I'm going to dress appropriately. But that's never been Zelensky's thing for whatever reason. And nobody's ever called him on it. So why would he stop?
Well, for whatever reason, he played a fictional Ukrainian president prior to becoming the president for 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And he's an actor. He's a stand-up comedian as profession. Daddy might have been a successful guy, but I mean, this is a guy that he's playing the part and playing it well, and he understands the pageantry of wearing that. But I'm kind of with Trump, and that was fine in the first year of the war, but like, you're not a tough guy. You're not a military guy. You're a soft little squishy actor, comedian who's playing a role here.
Mhm.
Now, if you're going to play a role, then you need to know your audience, and your audience is a suit guy. But
True.
anyway,
All true.
I'm just pissed off. I'm sorry.
That's all good. So what's Tony say here? Oh, let's dig into this one a little bit.
Tony says, why isn't anyone talking about the reason we're in this mess in the first place? Ooh.
And I'll take it back a little further on that one, Tony. I believe it was Obama who criticized Romney when they were asked what the biggest geopolitical threat was, and Romney said Russia, and Obama said, well, the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back.
I remember that. Yeah.
Right. So this is something that, has been seen brewing by people who are pretty good at looking over the horizon for quite some time. The political types are not those people. So, so, I mean, the reason we're here, I'll go back to, and I don't know where you're going at with that, Tony. Maybe we disagree. The reason we're here is NATO.
Yeah, absolutely.
NATO keeps pushing eastward towards Russia. And I've said that to people and they're like, oh, tough crap for Putin. Oh, he's a jerk. He's a blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, all those criticisms of Putin are true. How would you feel if China started parking military equipment in Mexico?
Yeah.
And usually gets really quiet after that. Like that's kind of, it isn't quite right up on the border, but we're pushing that way. NATO's been pushing that way.
And breaking promises all along the way.
Yep. And Zelensky is begging for NATO membership because then it, Article 5 gets into the into play, right? An attack on one is an attack against all. That will suck us into a war, and that I think that's what Trump was referring to with World War III.
Yeah, 100%. And I saw where Zelensky's saying he's willing to resign if Ukraine can get NATO, and to me that's a hollow promise because I don't think that's ever going to happen. Certainly not in this administration.
Yeah.
And Craig says, Reagan was a cowboy actor. Yeah, that's true. Subtlety and nuance,
Yeah.
But I didn't know this. Alan Kelly said he was told to wear a suit when he came to the White House, but he did not. So
that does change that a bit. Yes.
If the protocol officers were like, hey, look, we got these demands, you got to wear it. I'm not going to do it. Okay, then you're going to get punched in the face as soon as you walk through the door.
Yep. Yeah, that changes my perspective on that then.
What's Steve say?
Says his wife is Ukrainian and Zelensky is wearing the uniform of his military. He made a commitment to do that to support his troops. He should have reconsidered given the situation. Also, the cuss words that he mentioned was SOB, not just the B. So interesting. Okay, well, thanks for the perspective, Steve. Appreciate that. Yeah.
And I don't know that we've ever had a president that wore his military attire during war. And again, it's cultural thing. I get it.
Yeah.
Do it, but at the same time, there's some protocol in there as well.
Yeah.
Will Parker says allowing Ukraine into NATO is like allowing Iran to have nukes. Yeah, probably.
Yep.
All right, let's get back into the show. Where is it? Here it is.
All right. So, Trump policy concerns send U.S. consumer confidence plummeting to an 8-month low. This is so we saw consumer confidence go down. We know the effect that'll have on people spending. If they're not confident, they don't spend. That shows up in retail numbers and flows through like we talked about. Here's what I thought was the most important part of this. 12-month inflation expectations surged. So this is what people are expecting inflation to do over the next 12 months. They're expecting inflation to go higher. This is, in economic parlance, this is referred to as entrenched inflation expectations. So people are expecting inflation. That's going to change their behavior, right? So that means they're going to go out and spend the money when they get the money. And that can be good in the short term, but that just drives prices higher, right? This is exactly what we saw in the 70s. When we saw inflation go up in the early 70s and then start to come down, we've talked about this. Nixon got Arthur Burns, the chairman of the Fed at the time, to lower interest rates. But in the psyche of the American consumer, inflation was still a threat. So when inflation started to drop and interest rates dropped, people went out and spent money like crazy because they were scared, fearful that inflation was going to come back. That activity based off that fear caused inflation to spike even higher. And then I saw someone else mention the Arab oil embargo earlier in reference to something else. That also played into prices increasing because oil prices went up dramatically during that time as well. So nothing's ever exactly the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
But human emotions don't change. And if people are expecting inflation to continue and perhaps even increase, that's going to change behavior.
And again, it's like, well, why was there, we can always pull the why thread, but I always think it's kind of fun. Why was there an Arab oil embargo?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because we got off the gold standard, number one, and then foreign policy, number two, with us giving money and supporting Israel. And I'm sure there was a third, fourth, and fifth reason, but when, and that's why these tariffs and how they're done and what the interest rates are, all of it's going to have ramifications that we're going to feel for a long time. Craig says Churchill wore fatigues when he went to the Oval Office. Interesting. I did not know that. I'll see if I can find a picture of that.
So here's my only pushback on that is, was he asked to wear a suit? Because if, based on these reports, if Zelensky was asked to wear a suit and he didn't, that's different than if he had not been. Right. And perhaps in the past, he was not asked that. But if I'm going to the Oval Office and they ask me to, dress in a hula skirt, I'm going to wear a hula skirt.
Mm-hmm.
So that I would say that's perhaps a differential there.
I tell you, the thing that worries me is with us kind of breaking ties and causing a rift there with Zelensky. And I hope we get this back on track soon, because if not, it elevates the clown that, and no offense, Craig, I don't know how you feel about your prime minister, but Rich Brand, your old pal Rich Brown's not a fan at all. Him and Macron, it elevates their stature. You know what I'm saying? To be like, oh, we're going to come in here and get this done. Well, you're Europeans. You should have done something a long time ago. It's the wolf is at your door. And that's that little clip I showed didn't have the spark that lit it all. When Zelensky said, you have two beautiful oceans separate you and you're not feeling any of the pain, but you will someday. Yes. And he's like, and Trump's like, you have no right to tell us what we're going to feel. And that kind of led to the spiral.
That was a definite shot across the bow. I mean, that wasn't even the least.
That's almost a threat. You're going to feel it.
Yep. It was right up against that, wasn't it? So that's, when Zelensky said that, I was like, ooh, he's right. But to throw that out publicly like that, that's especially against a guy like Trump, that's not going to play out well for him. So
Tony says, I remember my dad making double-digit returns in CDs. He was putting every penny we had into high interest investments.
Yep. Also look at and consider, as this is happening now, high interest is a relative term. Because you got to compare it to inflation. What's the real return on that money? So if a CD is paying 15% back in the 70s, but inflation is running 18, you're losing purchasing power. Now, here's the flip side of that. And I'm not saying this is what to do now. And this certainly is not financial advice, as we always say. But if you could lock in, let's say in 1978, you could lock in a 30-year treasury bond at, I'm making up a number and saying 15%. That meant for the next 30 years, you made 15% annually. And 30 years on top of 1978 is 2008. So all through that, you're making 15% annually.
You're crushing life.
Absolutely. With zero risk, because they're going to print the money to pay that bond off.
Yeah.
Will that time come for us again? I don't know. We'll see. If
it
does, I'll tell you flat out, I'm buying treasury bonds.
I know. You and me both. Absolutely. I'll take 15% every year for 30 years. Are you kidding me?
Absolutely. Yep. I'll be like, what stock market?
Exactly. Kyle says, let's be real. Trump never liked Zelensky. Craig Holland says, being told or asked is a whole new ballgame. Our prime minister will do as Trump tells him, no matter what we think. That's interesting to say that, but I saw in the Oval Office where I think the guy's name is Sturm. I really don't even like saying it, but he said, oh, we've had a long history of freedom of speech in our country. I'm like, well, you had. Let's use the past tense. You don't have, you had.
Yeah.
Steve said Z's comments about the ocean sounded like a threat, but Ukraine has no leverage. I do believe the card analogy was lost on him. Yeah, me too. Parker says,
let me jump back to that one real quick.
Yeah, man, please.
Zelensky may have been referring to what a lot of us have talked about for a long time is when he was referring to first the oceans, geography does help us a lot, going all the way back to World War II, right? But the other side that we may feel the pain soon is we've talked about the threats that we know have come across the southern border and many that we suspect have come across the southern border. In fairness to Zelensky, you and I, brother, have made many of those same comments.
Right?
Oh yeah. Now we didn't say it out loud at a press conference in front of the president of the United States, right? But we've shared those same concerns about those things, and he may be proven correct on that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right. So, but there's a time and a place.
Let's see here. Will Parker says Zelensky had his first invite at the big boy table and didn't have enough sense to shut up and listen to big table talk. And I didn't think anything that JD said would have pissed Zelensky off. I went back and looked at it, and I'm like, he was just talking about, hey, what this all about is opening to diplomacy, which really I take as dialogue, having a conversation, sitting down together and figuring out how we can get this thing done. And I get it. Zelensky's pissed off. He's had hundreds of thousands of his soldiers killed, his people, his cities bombed. But at the same time, it's like, do you want to end it or not? Because if you think the U.S. is going to drop a nuke on Moscow to solve your problems, that ain't happening anytime soon.
Yep. So,
what does Don say?
Says the UK's Prime Minister Starmer said, quote, the UK are prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. And I did see a quote along those same lines yesterday.
That's tough luck for a guy that won't let his people say anything that might disturb one of their Muslim neighbors.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
And now you're going to go get your citizens killed?
Yeah. Well, and then the question becomes, so if UK puts boots on the ground in Ukraine and then UK soldiers are killed, does that trigger Article 5 of NATO? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be very interesting to see how that shakes out. Yeah.
Yeah. Craig has a great point. Says, would Trump have given up on Pearl Harbor just to get a deal done with Japan? I think not.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's hard. Again, it's so interesting that this is playing out in real time. Of course, Trump was our territory, and obviously the Ukraine is just a friend. But anyway.
And friend is a relative term in politics, right?
Oh yeah. Friends 1 minute, not so much the next.
Exactly. All right. So this is one to start watching, guys. I didn't realize it had grown to this point. They crashed the economy in 2008. Now they're back and bigger than ever. CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. Yes. So their Wall Street is once again creating and selling these securities backed by everything, corporate loans, consumer credit card debt is being compiled into bonds and sold off, leases on cars, airplanes, golf carts, really? Seriously? And payments to data centers. Okay. So basically this for the housing crisis period of time, this was really dominated by home mortgages, which are at least backed by something tangible, right? An appreciating asset, I guess is what I'm really trying to say. You look at these other things, these are all depreciating assets.
Yeah.
I would say the outcome is cooked in right away with this. Sorry, had to chastise the dog there. We have a puppy now, so
good luck.
Yeah, just when you get a chance, just shoot me. So anyway, so now, at least under the housing crisis, at least it was a generally appreciating asset that the CLOs were backed by. Now it's depreciating assets. They're guaranteed to go down in value. So what could possibly go wrong?
Help me make sense of that one. That's one of the things I've told my kids. Like, you need to be able to tell the difference, discern the difference between appreciating asset and a depreciating asset before you do anything. And if it's depreciating, I'm like, the value of that, like, oh, Dad, you like your new truck? I'm like, that truck sitting out there in the driveway might look nice now, but it's on its way to being a crush value of $300 at a scrapyard. That's where it's heading.
Yep. Guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
Yep. So, and that's a great and this goes back into our renting and housing discussion, right? An
Mhm.
appreciating versus depreciating asset. And renting is even worse than a depreciating asset because there's no asset,
Mhm.
right? So, and that's a great thing. So, we've heard, who is it? Good debt versus bad debt. Kiyosaki talks about
Mhm.
that. And I am a big fan of that, but I do
Yes.
not borrow money unless it's very favorable to purchase depreciating assets. I have
Mhm.
had car loans before. They were all at 0% or 0.1% when savings rates were slightly above that. Then it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But typically you don't want to borrow money to get depreciating assets. This is writing bonds, which is a loan against a depreciating asset.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how does that
So-
make sense?
It makes sense if we go to the next slide,
Okay.
because it
here we
depends
go.
which side of this you look at this from.
Hmm.
Let's look at the bottom here first, and we'll go to the chart. Sales of securitized debt have been surging since COVID-19, when the Fed lowered rates and investors were awash with cash and looking for investments because it yields. That's why it
Sure.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That's it.
Money
So-
seeks return.
Exactly. So you got to look at it from the banker standpoint. They can sell these off. The person buying them gets a yield, right? It doesn't mean it's a good long-term investment.
No, you're playing
Right.
musical chairs. You
Absolutely.
got to know when to grab the seat, or you're done.
That's it. So, or at the very least, pull it out from the guy next to you.
Right.
So, and speaking of pulling it out from the guy next to you, look at the forecast for 2025 there.
Mm.
Well above where it was in 2005, 2006.
You don't remember where you pulled this chart from, do you? Oh, the
This
source is S&P
is-
Global. Let's see there.
Yep. So if you go back, I think this was a Wall Street Journal article. If you go back one slide, yeah, Wall Street Journal
Yeah, okay,
article.
gotcha.
So this chart is part of that article.
Hmm.
So now, will that forecast play out? Don't know. Some of that will depend on what happens with the overall economy and people's appetite for risk, because these are risky, right?
Mhm.
But as we've said over and over again, money always seeks a yield. If these things are yielding whatever, I'm making up numbers here, guys. Let's say they're yielding 10%. And again,
Mhm.
I'm just using round numbers to make it easy. And there's a 20% chance of some of them defaulting. Well, if I buy a basket of them, that means I'll probably net out 8%.
Mhm.
That's pretty good when the 10-year yield's paying 4.5. So I put up a few defaults. Who cares?
I was going to say, and still these things start defaulting,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yep.
there's a tipping point with which there's no return.
Yep.
They default above X, and then you're upside down, and again, it's like watch the movie Margin Call is a great example of if you're finding out when the music stops,
Mm-hmm.
and then you pull the chair out from underneath your competitors, and then you'll survive. Everybody else is done. It's like,
Yep.
and how long, if we're doing these CDOs and CDSs again, before we have synthetic CDOs and CDSs being made and bought and sold and traded as commodities when they're not. And here we go again. We haven't learned anything.
Yep. Well, we didn't learn anything because our emotions didn't change, right?
Don
Right.
says it's like an economic hot potato. Holders have to move it along before their hands get burned.
Yep.
And everybody
For
in
sure.
the chain is looking that way too. From the people that originate the loan all the way
Yep.
up.
And the other term you'll hear out there now, because there's such a stigma with CDO and CDS, is CLO, collateralized loan obligation. So watch out for articles on those too, because they've renamed it because CDO became such a toxic term post housing crisis.
Collateralized loss obligation.
Yeah, there you go. So going along the same lines here, I ran across this. Moody's is the source of this chart. The wealthiest 10% of American households. Hold on, sorry. Puppies are fun. The wealthiest 10% of American households, those making more than 250 grand a year, are responsible for half of all consumer spending. Okay, that's a nice little tidbit. The chart is what intrigued me here. Look at the percentage of personal spending by income bracket. So I'm taking this as, discretionary spending. Now, I could be wrong in my assumption there, but look what's happened since 1992, 93, 94, somewhere in there for the bottom 60%, down. What have we seen at the same time? more and more and more credit card debt.
Yeah. And wages
Right.
going down,
And real wages
Like
going down,
stagnant, yeah.
right? Same thing for the 60 to 90%, the top 10%. Now there's the income side of this, right? Which is what they're talking about here. But typically your higher income earners are also going to be invested in assets,
Mhm.
whether that be stock market, real estate, whatever. So when those assets are going up, well, then they feel more confident, right? So this chart to me encompasses what we talked about with the feelings driving behavior
Mhm.
and the wealth
Absolutely.
effect,
Absolutely.
right? So as this has and has not split further apart, how's that bottom 60% going to do when they're renting?
And
Mhm.
it isn't this one of those variables people look at when you look at internal stability of a country leading to whether it be civil war or some sort of unrest when you have this widening gap.
Absolutely.
So that
Yep.
from a self-defense and preparedness standpoint, I see this and I go, this does not end well.
Correct. I agree.
The longer they continue to do this,
Yep.
no.
And let's really look at it. Let's dive into this a little bit. Let's look at Q1 2020 there. Look what's
Mhm.
happened since then.
Let me open this up.
The bottom, let's call it the bottom 90%, their personal spending has gone down. You can tell where some stimmy checks hit there for the bottom part. Look at the top 10%. What's happened to every asset class since 2020? First quarter of 2020. That's pre-shutdown, pre-stimmy checks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a hit in there for a little bit because we had one bad year in the stock market in 2022, right?
Mhm.
So a little bit there, but look what's happened since then. Stock market's been going great. Real estate's been going great, et cetera, et cetera. Been spending like crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck with that.
So, yep. So, these are trends that take a long time to play out. And the good news is if you can identify them early, you've got a long time to prepare.
Yeah. But we may be on the tail end of this thing in 5 to 10 years if we don't.
I would think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. This one plays back in some of our previous discussions. So this is Scott Bessent, Secretary of the Treasury now. I'll just read this off. Bessent's private sector recession comment rings more true than you might think, and it suggests there's a real risk in adjustment that the U.S. will enter a short-lived recession in late 2025.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom part of this is the part that really got me going down a rabbit hole yesterday. We can calculate the excess public sector employment since 2022, third quarter of 2022, by considering if government plus. Now, I'm going to assume that's government employees plus government contractors, but I don't really know for sure. If anybody knows, please shout it out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If government plus had just grown in line with the private sector employment, in other words, if the rate of growth of those two different employment sectors had been the same, instead of 4.1 million jobs being created since Q3 of 2022, we would have only seen 1.1 million. This is in government plus.
Mm-hmm.
In excess of almost 3 million jobs were created in government plus. Since June 2023, average private employment growth is 12 basis points. So that's 0.12%. But government plus is 84 basis points, 0.84% per quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I have argued for a long period of time. We've been in a recession for a couple years, but enormous amounts of government spending has kept the GDP number up. And we're seeing this is talking about just employment. But if we had 3 million fewer government jobs out there right now, what would this economy look like? Right? So this is the reality. The flip side of Doge is if you just get rid of those 3 million people right now, that starts to cascade, if you will, down the other side of this.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it very interesting. I've never heard a Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of the Treasury come out and speak this plainly about it.
True.
And if they're acknowledging that publicly, I can only imagine what they're saying privately. And this all but guarantees we're going to go into this adjustment, better known as a recession.
Mm-hmm.
Now, will they be able to do some soft landing stuff with that? Maybe some well-timed Doge stimmy along with that? Maybe. We'll see. Either way, there's going to be some pain there.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
Mm-mm.
yeah. So, along those lines.
Yeah, along those
Yeah.
lines of layoffs.
Yep. And this is where, well, I'll read this off and then I'll talk about kind of how stock market looks at this stuff. So Chevron staffers absorb long-awaited layoffs as the CEO pledges accountability. So internal town hall last week, roughly 40,000 employees were shown a video touting the oil giant's success in Colorado. And then half an hour later, they said, yeah, by the way, 20% of you are losing your jobs.
Mhm.
So this can become one of those things. So Chevron does this, and I didn't look at their stock price. Their stock price probably went up after this because Wall Street looks at that as, hey, you're cutting costs. This is awesome. Greater profits, more value in the stock. But then that puts pressure on, let's say, Exxon.
Right.
Well, hey, Chevron did that. What are you going to do?
But I think there's more to it than that. I
Okay.
was reading something this morning that Chevron has a license to get oil from Venezuela, and Trump's about to pull that license.
Okay.
So they're not going to be able to get the cheap oil out of Venezuela that they've had a lease or a license from the federal government to do, because he's trying to put pressure on Venezuela as dictator. And Chevron was probably knew that was about to come, and they're like, time to jettison.
Okay.
Some people are going to hurt.
Okay, good, excellent. That's awesome perspective. Thanks, man.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll see how this shakes out. I will stand by, however, Wall Street will see through that, and they'll just be like, hey, they cut. Why aren't you cutting? Oh, you're not going to cut? That's going to hurt your profit margins. We're going to sell off 30% of our holdings of your stock.
Yeah. I'm reading here right now, Will. It says President Donald Trump announced that he was revoking Venezuela's oil license. The reason was Venezuela's allegedly sluggish response to repatriating U.S.-bound migrants. Chevron had secured a rare permit to pump and market oil, but with strict conditions, including an exit deadline by end of July 2025. So Trump's not going to renew it. They know it. And again, this geopolitics is having market impacts. Who would have thought it?
Yep, absolutely. I want to go to Tony's comment here as a fellow car guy. This one here. His 70 Chevelle was depreciated in 1980. Wish I had it now. I've never met a car guy who was ever happy he sold a car.
Yeah, true.
So something
at some
about
point later down the road, you come back.
Yeah,
damn, I should have that.
Something about a Dodge Demon for you.
I know, that's exactly right.
Yep.
Wish I
We
had
all
it now.
regret it in the end. Yep.
Yeah,
So
we sold it for like $800 back in the 80s, and they're worth 30 or 40,000 now.
yeah. I almost bought a Barracuda back in like 90 something, 96, 97, somewhere in there. Actually, probably a little earlier, 94, 95. I almost bought a Barracuda, and I thought, oh, I just can't afford that $13,000. And it was a nice car. I wish I would have done it now. Would have been a great investment.
Oh my God.
So
John still has
it. Yep. And his is a beautiful car too. Beautiful car.
Yeah, I saw pictures. It's gorgeous.
Yes. What's this one say, brother, to take us out?
Tapper, then it's a conspiracy theory to say Biden has cognitive decline. It's a stutter. Tapper now, a book on the cover up. What a dirt bag.
Yep. And I looked this up. I looked on Amazon to see if this was real or somebody made this up. This is real. And this is why people don't have faith in the media.
I know, but the media will look straight in your face like I can't stand this woman, Caitlin Collins.
Mm-hmm.
No, we Republicans and Democrats watch my show. No, they don't.
Yeah.
Because you know why they watch us? Because we're unbiased. I'm like, you really believe that?
But they do. I shouldn't say they do. My perception is they do. And they see themselves as being unbiased like that. Because they live in an echo chamber, right? Mm-hmm. If you've got a whole bunch of friends who are super thinking one way or another, well, everybody's always unbiased, right? None of us are biased.
Oh, no.
Right. So, you know, I've got a few friends in media, and the entire office is center left. They go to the grocery store, they see center left. They go to their neighborhoods, it was Biden signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They take the kids to school, they run into people who think the same way, and so therefore they think it's fair.
Yeah.
Right. And we can all fall into that trap.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the first thing is acknowledge your bias, and then look for it. You know, what if it's speaking to your bias? You got to read a different book for a minute or look at a different article.
Absolutely. So there's a reason I check MSNBC every morning.
Yeah, you and me both. As painful as that is, I have to.
Yep. But you do have to, because you'll see stuff reported over there you will not see on Fox, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So,
well, once again, great show, my dear friend.
thank you, sir. Thank you.
And,
appreciate the opportunity.
And I guess you could take us out.
All right. Guys, fight's coming. Be ready.